Good morning, afternoon, and welcome to today's Q&A session. Our speakers today will be discussing how to keep your cloud project and maintenance work on track with effective security and application controls monitoring. So I'm delighted to have Evosys VP of Sales, Rick Anthony, here today, along with SafePaaS CEO Adil Khan. If you do have any questions throughout the session, then please feel free to send those over in your control panel. And we'll try and get those if we have time at the end of the session. If not, then we'll make sure we follow up in an email after the session. So we'll start off with some brief introductions, and then we will dive straight into the questions. So Rick, if you'd like to briefly introduce yourself.
Sure, absolutely. As you can tell from the picture and the video here, COVID has been bad to me. Just getting there. That was a move from the US, from the UK to the US. But my name is Rick Anthony. I'm the VP for Sales, as Emma said, and I've got about 24 years experience in implementing Oracle applications globally. I've done so here in the US, spent 11 years in the UK where I was implementing for Oracle for another partner there, and did so successfully. And I've been running sales teams and marketing teams successfully for about 15 years. And I've sat on a number of boards for user groups in the UK and the US. And I'm on various speaking tracks globally talking about why ERP implementations fail. And it's not necessarily talk about the software, but more so about how the implementations of software affect your business, but also the paths that you should take versus other paths that may not be so optimal for your business. So I'll be talking a little bit about those today as we go through. I'll turn it over to Adil for an introduction on himself as well.
Thank you, Rick, and we appreciate you joining our Q&A session today. I know that we have worked together for many years back when, even going back to UK when you were different organizations, and always found, your insight about ERP systems and benefits that they provide to customers, the risks and pitfalls to watch out for. So we appreciate you taking the time to talk to our customers and partners today to share your experiences at Evosys, which is obviously one of the leading cloud implementation partners for Oracle Cloud ERP, and if you are looking to go to cloud, we definitely would recommend Evosys as the organization to look at. I've been obviously many of you know us because we do this monthly webinars many years. We've been doing it. I am on the CEO here at SafePaaS, as you can read there, and I've been involved in the governance, risk, and compliance space for 20+ years now. I've helped over 100 companies implement governance, risk, and compliance controls to reduce their misstatement risks, financial misstatement risk, improve operations, detect fraud, investigate fraud, and written a book on this topic, which is a collection of case studies put together from my experiences. It's called the Governance, Risk, and Compliance Handbook for Oracle Applications, available on Amazon.
I think we lost the.
Yes, I had the opportunity to eventually lead the organization, a public organization in the US that listed on NASDAQ. So kind of dealt with a lot of the internal control and financial control issues. So I'm hoping to share some of my recent experiences working with Rick and his type organizations and customers that are looking to improve their projects, controls, and security in their cloud ERP as they're moving to the cloud. So with that, we can dig right into the first topic.
Yes, well, if we can have a little brief introduction of who SafePaaS and Evosys actually are, and then we'll dive into the questions.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so I think I covered a lot of our advertisement. I've talked about the book and so forth. If you are involved in the user groups, please look out for us. We do try to. One of our mission is to get the risk knowledge out to the market through professional groups and so forth. Obviously, with things starting to recover, we are hoping to get back on the face-to-face meetings with our customers and our travels. But right now, we're doing a lot of remote work until everybody gets vaccinated and we're back up and running. So thanks for staying tuned. And just a little bit about our products. Again, this is not a forum to talk about products, but just if you are looking to get onto SafePaaS for risk and controls, we cover all the major enterprise risk sectors. And this is basically checkboxes, so everything from documenting risk and controls, testing those controls using audit tools, doing compliance certification if you're a SOX customer in the US or other places. And then, of course, access controls, segregation of duties, sensitive access, data protection, and then continuous controls monitoring. So looking at transaction risks like duplicate payments and invoices. If you're going to the cloud, we'll talk a little bit about some examples of success stories of customers that have used our access and monitoring tools to improve and streamline their cloud applications. And then analytics, safe insight, and process control. So where you have limits in cloud, we can extend that using SafePaaS, for example, your financial close process, automating that, your procurement management, customer service, and so forth. So extending your cloud ERP to address not only just control, but optimize your business.
And Rick?
Excellent. So I'm just going to use this slide just to speak a little bit about Evosys, to qualify myself. So Evosys has been around about 16 years, and we are an Oracle only shop. We've got more than 1,164 customers, and that's growing on a weekly basis, actually. And those are all cloud customers, and we've spent a lot of time in focusing in Oracle Cloud is all we do. And you'll see underneath there how many various implementations we've had across the board in the various pillars of Oracle, so ERP, HCM, EPM, supply chain, and such. But also taking on-premise customers to cloud. So when I mean on-premise, we're talking about eBusiness, PeopleSoft, JD Edwards customers to cloud. So we've created a number of accelerators out there for it. We do have a very large global presence. We're in 30 countries. Here we're focusing in the US, where we've seen significant growth in our practices here. We've got well over 1,500 consultants working for us, and I'd like to say those are permanent staff, not contractors. Those are permanent staff. Most of them are housed in our center of excellence, and that's one thing that we've done through the years is we've created a center of excellence that allow us to give our customers hyper efficiencies. Because we only focus in Oracle, we're able to invest right back into Oracle and create these hyper efficiencies so that when customers are looking at implementing a project, it's not starting from square one. This isn't our first rodeo. We've got teams of people based on industry as well as technology pillar to help you. As a matter of fact, ERP Magazine in the first quarter of last year said that we have taken more people to Oracle Cloud than any other partner globally. And so that's what ERP Today magazine said, and and then Oracle has said about us is we've won the HCM Partner of the Year in 2019, the last in-person open world event. We received the Global Partner of the Year for HCM. And then in 2017, we received Partner of the Year for ERP, distinction that we're very proud of, and we continue to hold. And we are on the Magic Quadrant for implementation partners, and we sit up there with a lot of the big four firms. And I like to tell people, we've got the expertise and the experience as the big fours, but because of these efficiencies at a significantly lower price. So that's a little bit about Evosys. Thank you.
Okay, fantastic, Rick. Well, let's dive into some of the questions. So
Sure.
if you'd like to take the lead on this one, Rick. So what are some of the key, what are some of the key business drivers for moving to the cloud, moving ERP to the cloud?
It's an interesting question there, because there's, we're obviously in the middle of a global pandemic, and there was there is what the drivers were before the pandemic, and as it's starting to stabilize, they're starting to come back. But initially, a lot of those drivers around when the pandemic started was to digitize the transformation of the business. I was talking to customers where it was taking them hours to, mobilize their teams that had to work from home. And they realized that having a non-premise, non-cloud solution really prohibited a lot of the business functions. Where I was talking to one customer that, they had to segregate their teams because they only had an hour to do their job in the accounting area because of their VPN. So what that led to is a lot of customers wanting to go to cloud. And our customers that were on cloud, we had one customer, a global company focusing in luggage. There's only a couple of names out there, and that's the customer. And the CHRO has said that if it wasn't for Oracle Cloud, they would not be able to mobilize their internal team, but their employees. So they had numerous retail shops that had to close almost immediately, and as soon as the pandemic hit. And if it wasn't for their HCM cloud system that they were able to log in via their mobile device or on their laptop, they would have lost touch with all their employees.
Wow.
And because of that, they were still able to stay online, stay on track, and we were in the fourth phase of the implementation. And since COVID began, we've completed 3 more phases. And it's one of those interesting things, because a lot of people don't focus on what happens to the business when you go through a transformation, and some of the business leaders around it. And I see that a lot of those areas were around how to get some of those efficiencies during COVID times, and that's what I've seen quite a bit. And if I can also talk to what on-premise customers are. So the Oracle customers that were on Oracle software before, like eBusiness and PeopleSoft, and they're doing a lot of transformation right now, as a matter of fact, as well. And they're moving to cloud because of their technical debt. They've got huge amount of technical debt that's associated with all the customizations they made, and the various integrations they had in managing those. And they've had those systems there for so long, they've lost track of how many. And part of the ideology behind moving them to cloud is showing them what they have and what they don't have. And there's a mindset when they think about this technical debt that they've incurred, that they can't move to cloud. And one of the things that we do, because they've got so much invested in their on-premise solution, that they have teams. I mean, for instance, one customer we're working with, they had about 50 people managing their on-premise solution.
Wow.
And we told them, I said, we don't want you to displace these people when you move to cloud. What you'll do is you'll retrain them and put them into other areas of the business, because managing a cloud solution is very different, and the duration of time is very different. I implemented eBusiness when I was in Europe for a subsidiary of Expedia, and that was a 5-year project. If you're talking about cloud and implementing cloud, that's generally a 12-month to 18-month project at max for a complex implementation. So the key drivers in some of that is learning that this isn't going to be nearly as expensive as it was with your on-premise solution, because cloud implementations are a shorter cycle. And speaking to Evosys, we have a number of accelerators that allow us to get them there faster. So their return on investment is a lot faster because of that. And another of the business drivers that I've seen is that there isn't a source of the truth for those customers that weren't necessarily former Oracle customers or on-premise customers. They didn't have one source of the truth. There's disparate systems. I'm working with numerous customers right now where they have multiple systems doing multiple things across the business, and they understand that transformation will cause a disruption to the business, but they set that aside because they know the transformation will bring them so they can become more competitive in the market. And that's where they need to really strive, is to change the ideology that IT is a cost center, that it's a strategic tool. It's a strategic tool.
Right.
So those are the key drivers I'm seeing right now. And I don't know, Adil, you may have seen a few things out there as well.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. So, you talked about not only the improvement of the business itself by moving to the cloud, especially I like the point you made about, how COVID has gotten all of us to think our business model slightly differently, or maybe massively differently. So I think that's what I see too, is that there seems to be an acceleration and level of interest among our customers that were perhaps thinking about moving and transforming to cloud because of all the benefits you laid out. But I think we've seen more customers calling us and saying, look, is it the agility? I guess one other thing I might mention, that just we want to be able to get more responsive for the next event that occurs. What we have learned from COVID is that you don't know all your risk factors. I'm a risk guy, so I talk to customers about risk all the time, and they're saying, this was risk way outside on the left field. Everybody had heard of this thing called pandemic, but nobody had really put that in the disaster recovery plan. And so we all got tested for agility, including our own company, SafePaaS. We had to learn to work with customers remotely and make sure we had the right tools and people had right access. So our customers are telling us the same thing, is that we want a system and capabilities that if our supply chain is impacted because we can't get the product in the US from China, or people can't travel to a site to perform, and repair on an oil and gas device, how can we get to an IoT or whatever that technology is? And I think the cloud is really the enabler they're looking at to make that agility, right? And so I think not just operational efficiency, which is the main driver, as you've laid out with some examples, and certainly the role of IT that's changing from, I think I like the term you used about, it's almost like an IT debt you're carrying, and being a finance guy, I'm thinking, okay, well, how do you turn that debt into an asset? And I think just to kind of reiterate on that point, that we are seeing our customers put IT folks to better use and upgrade their skill sets. So instead of applying patches on Oracle database, now they're building big data solutions using things like Snowflake or our tools like DataProbe. And so they're becoming more aligned with the company strategy to be more agile and focus on operational efficiencies. And really, they're getting more done in less time and working from anywhere, which is the theme. So I just wanted to bring up that agility point out a little bit more that you touched on, that our customers are impacted with this unprecedented risk that none of us predicted, or very few, I guess, did. But I think now they're saying, okay, what we have learned from this, let's apply that and make our business more resilient and more agile for any change that we may face, whether it's external, internal, market, industry, whatever it is. Because change is something we all thrive on, right? And either you capitalize on that or you don't. So the business is becoming more agile, and I just wanted to add that to the excellent points you made.
No, and I think that's it's a very strong point right now, because this new normal isn't going to go away. Mm-hmm. We've learned we can do more with less. We don't have to have real estate And if you talk to the technology leaders like Google and Oracle, they're telling their employees they don't even have to go to the office ever. So how do you make your workforce work in a market like that? And you got to give credit where credit's due. Is that these business leaders responded quickly to this agility, and there was a small blip, but now I think everybody is used to it. And I do feel sorry for all the commercial realtors out there that are going to have a lot more assets on their books.
Well, I know you're growing, and maybe you can convert some of them to your 1,500 plus employees you need.
Absolutely.
So, well, that's a good way to segue to the next question.
Sure.
Emma, if you want to lead us.
Yep. Okay. So, what are the top 3 reasons in your view, Adil, an organization should consider? Why an organization should consider security and application controls in the early stages of a cloud implementation?
Yeah, so what my customers tell me and what I tell them is, it's the risks are the risk, whether you're running cloud or you're running on premise or whatever the next trend will be. It's all about, building the trust of your customers and your employees and your stockholders and stakeholders in general. And that's, starts with misstatement risks that exist in the financial statements, right? So we want to be able to report accurate, timely, and complete information to stakeholders, especially if you're a public company listed in the US public stock exchange or UK, one of the major ones. You have to do that. That's just a cost of doing business for our customer. And that's my typical customer at SafePaaS that I deal with, the CFOs and so forth that have some independent authority, whether it's a bank or a regulatory authority, like in US, it's the SEC ultimately through PCAOB that was established back in 2002 when Bush signed that into the law. And so yeah, I mean, that's the number one thing that they're always concerned about. Cloud doesn't change that. What they're coming up to me and saying is that, cloud makes them a little nervous, right? Because their data is now sitting somewhere else, and what if it changes and it has an impact? Someone changes, for example, in case of Oracle, Oracle's doing a great job of applying the patches and keeping your systems up and running, and that's some of the benefits you're receiving. But if that change impacts your, let's say, a account somehow, let's say you have a control called three-way match, which is a common example I use. And if somehow that gets switched around to two-way match, then you might end up with a liability that is not expected to show up on your balance sheet, and you don't see it and you report that liability. So that's kind of you got to get your customers comfortable. And so we're working with folks like Rick and Evosys to make sure that our partners, when they're implementing the software, that they have this additional capability that they can mention to their customers that, hey, cloud's actually going to be safer than your on-premise because you're not going to have 50 people touching your configurations all the time, because that's what they had to do, going back to the Rick, the term you coined, which is technical debt, right? So you have to have so many people logging in and messing around with those key setups all the time that you essentially didn't have that control. Once you move to the cloud, you have fewer people that need to touch your configuration. But if they do touch it, you want to make sure that there's some sort of a control in place to alert the right people so that your financial statements are still accurate, timely, and complete. So that's always been the number one driver for SafePaaS customers that we deal with, the CFO office and so forth. And that remains the same. It just gets better with the cloud, but you have to take a few steps. So like I said, we're working with organizations like Evosys that implement cloud and getting involved early to help help these controls be identified and put in place. So when these processes are brought in from on-premise to cloud, that all these controls are up and running from day one. So that I would say would probably be number one. And I've got a few case studies later on. I'll just mention a few of them on this topic as we go through it. The other thing is, of course, the assurance. So overall assurance about the business. So if you are, I have a couple of oil and gas customers I'm working with. So one of the things, being in Texas here, that I deal with is the oil prices fluctuating and changing, and impacting their business. And we have seen a lot of impact in the last year or so as markets have changed. We're driving less and we're consuming less oil, which is good for the environment. But businesses have to adjust to that and move into new businesses. So overall, operational efficiencies. And looking at how can controls help drive those efficiencies. So what I'm talking about is in our risk lingo is operational risk, right? So for example, if you are concerned about your revenue recognition issues because you're dependent on some component that's part of your work in progress that needs to be in place in the manufacturing plant before you can build the product and ship it out the door. For example, I'm working with some auto parts companies that supply to the top major auto parts. They're a supplier in that supply chain. We have a number of those manufacturing customers. So they have an impact on revenue recognition, which has an impact on their stock ultimately, and you can make and break your quarterly results. So having that assurances in place, making sure that when you go up and running in the cloud, that all those operational controls that you had on premise are now automated and available. So for example, if there's a key component that goes into your auto part that needs to be shipped out to GM or Toyota or whatever is not available, you can get an alert early on. So those kinds of bottlenecks that you were possibly doing through custom reporting and a lot of the kind of a homegrown systems that were maybe customized. A lot of people customize their on-premise system because they had the database, they could write queries and whatever. But now it's all API and service. So where SafePaaS is helping customers is improve those efficiencies by identifying when certain thresholds of risk, in this case bottlenecks in the process, are detected by SafePaaS and alerting the people in procurement to go ahead and execute that procurement transaction, get the materials in the warehouse so the product can be built and shipped out. So that's business assurance, the second category of areas that drive customers to include us as part of their overall cloud strategy. SafePaaS becomes part of that risk mitigation strategy. And then finally, just the cost of remediation. So what happens in almost all the accounts that I worked with, you march your way out. As Rick said, these projects are a lot faster. Instead of 5 years, it's maybe a year and maybe even less or somewhere in there. So you have to still go through all those software development lifecycle steps and go through analysis, design, all that good stuff to go to deployment. So now, but you have a lot less time to do it, and it's certainly you got to work at a quicker pace, and you're looking for things to go in right the first time, and cloud gives us that opportunity because we can all collaborate. So where SafePaaS can help customers reduce that, the cost of remediation. What used to happen is in the on-premise world is you would bring in the auditors when you got into user acceptance testing. They would download some scripts, run the scripts, tell them, hey, you've got these users that have too much access. They can create a supplier, pay a supplier, approve a journal entry, enter a journal entry. So this is a big risk. Go fix that. And we would have a lot of time to do that. Now you may have a month or less to do all that, right? And if you don't do it, this will become an audit finding that your CFO has to then deal with post go live. It's not the end of the world. Some customers, won't go live. So it might cost, if you've got Evosys working with you and now you got to tell Evosys, hey, we need you for an extra 3 months. Evosys has to be involved in it now, right? So you've just created a bigger cost, you've missed your deadlines, and obviously that's a project risk to you because your audit is holding things up, right? So being able to get the project done on time and under budget, you want to make sure that you build the controls and security right the first time. We all know that, Oracle sends out best practices and they send out roles that have plenty of access, and that makes total sense from a vendor standpoint because Oracle wants you to try out all the privileges and all the capabilities that they provide in the software and then decide which one should be allowed through roles to specific users in finance and procurement, etc. So what customers are asking us to do is, can you give us clean roles before we get to our user acceptance? So I'm working with one oil and gas company here in my region that wants to take the standard roles and rebuild them and test them in SafePaaS before they're ever deployed for UAT, so that their external auditors and their internal auditors can review those. So by the time you get to UAT, you're clean. So UAT is a lot faster. You're hitting your milestones. You're not adding extra costs. You're not surprising the CFO with audit findings. And so that's kind of the third piece that I see why organizations are looking at security and controls as part of their cloud implementation, not waiting till after the implementation. Because once you're live with cloud, it's sitting out there, and you got thousands of users possibly accessing in, and then it becomes very difficult to mitigate risks and control user access and so forth, because like changing the engine when the car is running. So I think it makes intuitive sense. Where I find that customers miss this opportunity is when they don't include this in the planning phase. So one of the things I wanted to talk to Rick about, or have him kind of explain to folks that are interested in this topic, is how do you really plan a good cloud project, and we'll have him kind of give us some examples there. But yeah, so from a controls perspective and security perspective, I would summarize that again by saying, number one is always the same as has been for decades, which is, customers want to use these ERP systems to report accurate, timely, and complete information. By involving SafePaaS up front, you can ensure that happens. And so you check that box for your CFO, your CIO, and your auditors. Number two is business assurances, which is your operational risk, which is the risk that keeps you from recognizing revenue or possibly cash leaks on the bottom line, such as duplicate payments. And number three is that remediation expense that you can avoid by getting things done right the first time. So Rick, that's kind of my view of what I see from customers. I'm sure you see a lot more customers from a bigger picture. I mean, what would you like to add? Anything you'd like to add to that, or
Sure.
question or pushback?
No, and I think it really does need that visibility, and it's the responsibility of the implementation partner to address that, because oftentimes a software vendor, they're cost sensitive, and they want the cost, so they don't want to look at additional costs being added to a project. But one of my talking points that I talked about is why ERP implementations fail. And oftentimes some of the components of that failure are communication to the customer as far as reality checks go. They need to be able to understand. You have to, in the not even before the design phases. I'm working with one customer right now where we provided a proof of concept for revenue recognition. And we did a proof of concept for them, and we then provided the documentation they needed for their auditors before they're even deciding on the software. We're providing the documentation for the auditors so that they can review this as a certifiable solution.
Right.
So it's something that starts even before the selection process starts, is to have those open discussions so they're aware of the repercussions, because you don't, like you said previously, you don't want to be at a point, and we're sitting down with the CFO and the auditors have come in and have said, you didn't validate this, and now there's a change order with the project that adds another quarter or a third of the total price of the project. So it's something that it's the responsibility of the SI. And for this particular customer, we were involved. We had the Big Four involved and a number of others, and we were the only SI that brought this up, and it turned out to be a big issue. So now it's on the it's gathered the attention. It's on the menu for the implementation.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think the cost factor that you brought up is important. People often think that looking at risk and controls is very costly, because we have all seen the Big Four budgets and costs and bills. But in fact, it doesn't have to be. So it can be pretty agile, kind of building on that theme. This quick implementation that Evosys does, it's really not that complicated. The ERP Cloud's been here for a long time. It's a stable product, thousands of customers using it. Evosys clearly is a market leader in that. And so you could use our insight services like Evosys can and other partners can, where they can simply look at a lot of these key setups and configurations within literally, a couple of weeks of effort. So it's not a significant cost, and we have special arrangements with partners like Evosys where it's nominal cost, but the benefit is significant because our goal is to have customer ultimately come to a more sustainable stage after they go live, and that's where we get more involved. But I think during the implementation, there are methodologies that are built into what Evosys can do for you, where you can essentially embed a lot of the controls without having all that overhead of a big four audit firm that may be a million's worth of billing. You don't have to go through that kind of a scary proposition, for a few $1,000s or whatever that is, depending on the scope of work. You could get a very good view of where are the risks and how you're going to mitigate them, so you can get through that project within a year or less, or within reasonable amount of time without dragging it out for years and years.
Absolutely.
So thank you, Eric, for kind of adding to your perspective to that. Emma, let's move on to the next point.
Yep. Okay. So following on from the previous question, what are some lessons learned from successful cloud transformations, Rick?
Yeah, and there's that word transformation. It's just so overused these days because oftentimes people don't understand the repercussions of transformation. So part of what we do is leading to that success is helping them understand, because these implementations are shorter, that means that their team is going to be very much involved through that whole process, and managing those expectations with the customer. So we sit down with them and say, okay, for this stage, this is the people we'll need and the percentage you'll need. And if you give that to them in the beginning, you manage that expectation all the way through, you've already trained most of your users when they go live, and now they're using the system, their adoption and adaption is very high. Now, one of the key things I've seen with lessons learned is, when you implement an on-premise solution, like I was saying previously, and 24 years of experience in implementing Oracle applications is a long time. You get less for murder now. Is understanding, you've got 5 years to implement an on-premise solution. Now you're taking that, and when you made that decision on that implementation, it was going to take you 5 years. There were lofty ideas of, this is my return on investment. This is what I'd like, okay? And what would happen is halfway through, or maybe even a quarter way through, you're tired, that fatigue, implementation fatigue starts to hit, and you've lost sight of that ROI, and you don't care about it anymore. You just want your life back.
Mm-hmm.
You just want your life back. So at the end of that implementation, about go live, you hit the switch. That CIO and the CFO that signed off on it, they've lost sight of that ROI, and they don't want to consider it anymore. They just want to go back to their business. Now, the difference with cloud, of course, is it's much shorter. So, working with customers to help them look at, to say, what does good look like? What does good look like, and how are you going to measure success? And what are those KPIs that you're going to use to measure success? Because with that shorter duration of time, you can actually use that as part of your implementation strategy and work with the customer to identify those KPIs that are going to be impactful to the business, either operationally or on the audit side, all those various areas. So, on the system adoption side, all those areas, so that you're now able to, at the end of it, measure success with actual results. And that's one of the things that we work with our customers is to help them to do that. And we've got these toolings, very similar name. It's called Insight, and it helps our customers to achieve success. And
right.
we've actually got so daring with it is, part of our implementation strategy is to implement these KPIs, and we'll hold the last payment milestone to attainment of those KPIs.
Mm-hmm.
So we're putting our skin in the game to make sure they're successful. And I think I'd like to see a lot more partners have that level of confidence with their implementations to do that, because I'd say in the last 3 years, Evosys has been brought into, in North America alone, 60 rescue projects.
Wow.
Okay, and what that says is there's nothing wrong with the software.
Mm-hmm.
It's going back to those talks I give on why implementations fail. So we're brought into these and we turn those around and turn them into successful implementations. I just had a rescue project go live, and to hear the CHRO and the CEO, say thank you, that's huge. That's huge.
Right.
I think just looking at some of my notes on as to some of the lessons learned, a lot of it is a lot of it starts to look at what the customer is going to need for that transformation, and understanding that it's not boiling the ocean. So to save costs, a lot of customers choose a big bang approach to their implementation. So they'll do multi-pillar, so they're talking ERP and HCM and supply chain, all these other modules do it as
right.
a big bang for saving costs. And one of the takeaways is you shouldn't do that.
Mm-hmm.
Shouldn't do that. Let the adoption, and a phased approach help to bring those customers along in the journey. So looking at phased approach when implementing cloud solutions is really important, just because, and because of that phasing, that doesn't mean you've extended a project to 2 years. That means you've extended a 9-month project to 14 months.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not as though it's going to be overly costly, but it is going to help that customer achieve a lot of their adoption goals. Those are some of the main lessons learned.
So Rick, I'm wondering what can be a lesson that you can share with our listeners about. You've seen 60. That blows my mind. You've seen 60 rescue projects. So that sounds like there's obviously people aren't doing things as well as Evosys. Maybe they're new to it. The partners are not there walking them through all the key risks and mitigating those during the project. I mean, would you be able to kind of call out something is there a theme you see? Like, why are so many projects not successful? As you said, the technology has been there, and I know it's mature. So are people just hiring the wrong coaches to do the type of work they need done, or their expectations are wrong, or what do you see out there, or is it all unique to each customer?
Well, there is a trend,
Mm-hmm.
and and I say there's a trend because there's obviously, without naming names, there's the big four that go
Mm-hmm.
in there and try and compete at a lower price. And what'll happen is they'll change order request the customer, and the customer starts to see this rather quickly and says, no, we got to stop it. Let's get a partner with a fixed price in here, because otherwise this implementation is going to be a lot more expensive, but also take a lot longer to do.
Gotcha.
There's some of that, but there's also, and I think here's what I see a lot of it is the products mature, and there's but there's the skill sets for these projects you really do have to have. And a lot of the mistakes I've seen is taking somebody with a Oracle on-premise skill set and trying to fit them into a cloud role. And that's like taking a waterfall project manager and trying to put him into a Scrum Master role.
There you go, yeah.
It just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. And it's a different ideology and methodology about it.
Right.
You know, I've seen that, and I've seen just people not understanding. You know, for instance, we've created a lot of industry extensions, and those cloud is cloud because it's supposed to be work for everyone, but every industry has different types of business processes that aren't vanilla. So what's needed to be done is to create some of these extensions. Like, for instance, I'll use an example of construction engineering, for instance.
Sure.
Construction engineering is more project focused, but more so than that is they've got the subcontractor element to it. You know, we looked at those gaps within cloud and created these extensions. We've invested in those. So when I've seen some of those failures that come about, is because those SIs didn't have an understanding of those industry extensions and those gaps. I can talk about one customer that is a engineering customer, a global customer, 6 billion turnover company. And it's taking they went live, and it's taking their engineers 3 hours a week to enter in their time cards, because the SI partner that implemented didn't have consideration for understanding that their business is based on projects, and each one of those engineers may be working on 4 different projects. So they didn't correctly configure that element to it. I mean, I can go through numerous.
Yeah, no, that's very helpful for me, because I hear a lot from the CFO office, but I think as Evosys, you bring that broader picture of where these projects fail and what's the lesson learned. So just for my own benefit, and I hope it helps others too, I would say that what I've heard today from Rick is that scope management is really important, getting that scope to avoid those change orders. So as Rick, you said, that big bang sometimes doesn't work. Don't try to, in my words, I would say, don't try to boil the ocean, right? Hit some of the strategic areas first. So scope management seems like really important to success. The other thing that I think is unique to you at Evosys is that this knowledge about the industry, right? So the examples you're presenting, while a lot of people have industry knowledge, but I think what's unique about success that I'm hearing is that not only the industry knowledge, but then how do you apply it to this technology to make the two connect? And I think having that is a big factor in a lesson learned, I guess, for people that are starting on this journey. Learn from others' mistakes, as they say. Now, the other thing that I've seen in some of our customers, and is public knowledge and news. Recently in UK, there was a big cloud project that was canceled, and we were brought in because the customer said we can't rely on the numbers coming out of the system, and we were just puzzled. It turned out that the auditors, again, the folks that I deal with the most often, had basically done some testing, and the partners and the customer just didn't know how to provide the assurances around access controls and so forth. And for that simple reason, they just pulled the plug, and that may be another rescue project we can send your ways, Rick. So that's unfortunate. But yeah, so not only what I hear a lot about is failure because controls and security, but I think what I'm learning today is that it's also just basic scope management, having the right resources that can map your industry-specific needs to your Oracle technology. Because you can bring in a lot of experts in the industry knowledge alone, but if they don't know how to fit that into Oracle, basically you can't customize the software, so you're going to end up with a failure, right? So I see that point.
Absolutely, and because cloud, and I think, you know, the big difference is, you know, when you have a on-premise type solution, you customize the heck out of it, you know, SAP
Right.
and the others. You can do that with cloud. It's not customization, it's configuration.
That's right.
And that's the key difference there.
Thank you. Let's move on to the, I think, final question. And then we have a few minutes.
We have a couple more questions actually, but we'll, yeah, we are short on time. So
yeah, that's what I was thinking. We only got 10 minutes.
Okay, so how can an organization proactively protect sensitive data in an Oracle ERP Cloud project?
Okay, let me take that question, Rick, if that's all right. So yeah, I mean, you know, I like the word proactive there, because that is kind of our mission. You know, we want to prevent customers from having to remediate and waste limited resources on fixing things in a reactive manner, you know, where they find out from the auditors for the first time they have a problem. And now the CFO is involved as the project manager essentially while doing their day job, and now everybody's jumping through the hoops. It's just not a fun place to be, and I'm sure you guys have been there. So yeah, I mean, from our standpoint, the way to make that proactive to protect your sensitive data is, let's start with what is sensitive data first, right? Because let's get on the same page. And so we, first of all, like customers to think about data in terms of classifications. You know, what are different data classifications, especially with, you know, the recent, I say recent, but it's been a few years now since Rick and I started talking about GDPR back when you were in UK. So, you know, if you're following the principles, guidelines of general data protection regs that came out of EU a few years back, or you're talking about California, you know, Consumer Protection Act. Those are some good principles that provide you that framework of data protection. So my thought would be that if you want to be proactive about data protection, first of all, you know, figure out what's your framework. Either there's one mandated upon your organization because you do business in California or Europe or whatever that is, or there's one that you know, you can pick from. So NIST is an organization I've always relied on for, and some of these principles sort of, in my mind, come from that framework, or there's an ISO framework available. So I think having that you know, framework, a common lingo within the organization, having people with that data protection or ownership in the organization. That's what we have at SafePaaS, because many of our customers are in Europe and California, and so we ourselves have to comply with that. So the way we do that is by having that responsibility and accountability with folks in the organization at senior enough level to where you know, we have a framework of what we share with our customers to earn their trust in a opportunity on, you know, what is our framework, how do we protect data, what is our principle about, you know, for getting a consumer data, what type of data we scramble, what type of data so all of those are different methodologies that's driven off our framework and principles that we follow here, SafePaaS. And then same thing with, once you have the you know, the framework in place, you have to kind of classify your data in what is, like, you know, mildly sensitive, moderate, and something is so secretive, you know, restrictive, if you will, that only very few people can see in that information, like the bank accounts for a supplier, maybe one in your ERP system, employee national IDs, or salaries, or even emails in some cases, right? So we deal with defense contractors, federal agencies, et cetera, military organizations, where the data sensitivity is different based on, you know, their objectives and their business model. So I think having that classification done up front when you're implementing cloud ERP. So recently I had a kickoff call, as a matter of fact, today before this call, with a customer that has some different rules of data sensitivity based on different regions in the world. For example, in Germany, they can only see certain data. They also have some special projects going on in Middle East where they need to be able to protect the information about specific individuals working in those markets. So I think the classification is unique to your organization, and while we all have the general guidelines from various mandates on our like privacy mandates and so forth. Others are unique to your industry or your operations. So based on that, we start by looking at the level of sensitivity data, identifying that data, and then once we classify this data, then we are able to provide the right level of proactive management to protect that data against those principles and policies that you've established. So for example, as I was saying earlier, you may want to mask the data like employee IDs and employee names, for example, or social security, where it comes under identify information. Same thing with customers and suppliers. In other cases, you want to even restrict access, right? So you may have certain data that is masked, so you can go on a supplier screen, you can see supplier maybe name, but not the tax ID or not the bank account, right? So that's masked. In other cases, you may have a requirement where, let's pick on, for example, customers. You have warranties sitting up for, if let's say you're a car manufacturer, and you have warranty information about your consumers, your customers, what cars they drive, and so forth. And let's say you're a German automobile manufacturer, one of the customers we're talking to. You want to be able to even restrict, how long you hold that data, that warranty data. How do you get rid of that data? All those principles around data protection can be implemented in Cloud ERP. And then finally, for the lower risk areas, you just want to monitor it, like who's going in there and looking up supplier bank accounts, or customer credit limits, or employee benefits. Those kind of things you want to just monitor while they're not part of your data protection principles as high risk. They didn't come across as high risk or restrictive, but they're low risk items. So you still want to monitor them, or moderate risk, for example. So that's something that's the capability in SafePaaS that can help you monitor who's accessing what data, how to restrict that access, how to mask that access. And because SafePaaS is built on the Oracle platform, we essentially sit in the same cloud as Oracle ERP applications. We have some unique capabilities through the APIs. The other thing that's unique about protecting data is our customers, you also see, are launching multiple clouds. So they will put, we have a customer in Europe that has 20 different cloud ERPs in the telecom industry, where they may go from one to the next, but they want to apply the same data protection and controls policies across all of their different cloud instances. So SafePaaS can do that because it sits outside of your cloud ERP, but it monitors multiple instances or other instances like Workday or SAP, whatever you might have. So you're able to then have a central picture of all your data privacy, and that's how you become more proactive. I know we're running out of time, Emma. If you want to just kind of hit a couple of case studies, and then I'll let Rick, you kind of say the final word, and we'll close the call. Appreciate everybody's participation.
Yep. Okay. Well, okay. So let's choose this case study here. Adil?
We'll do one, and then Rick will have you talk through some example, and we'll close it out. So this is a cloud transformation project where I'm working with an energy infrastructure company that is in the pipeline business. And as Rick was sort of setting up, I was thinking about this customer that, they have all those challenges that Rick identified with his examples, where they have this 5-year plus ERP projects were going on, and lots of different systems, that technical debt he talked about, all of those problems and baggage, which resulted into bottlenecks in the process, poor security and risk management visibility. So they have adopted, obviously, SafePaaS, which are access solution for cloud ERP with APIs, native APIs into Oracle. So it's by a touch of a button, we can take a snapshot of the security and configurations, analyze that against the rule set in SafePaaS. And they also purchased the monitoring capabilities, which is coming out very handy over the last year, because as they're rolling out different processes, they can get their KPI information. And while employees are kind of working from different locations and working from home and all that good stuff, they're able to make sure there are no process bottlenecks, or if one comes up that alert is sent. And I think I already touched on the example. So one of the things that we're able to help them do is, as I had mentioned before, is get through the UAT very quickly, make sure all the roles were designed and tested and simulated in SafePaaS before they were deployed into UAT. So roles management is key benefit that has reduced their risk on go live dates. Being able to provide the reports, the SOD segregation of duty reports to their management and auditors to provide that business assurance around what users are going to have what access. So simulating that even before they go live, right, because of the simulation capabilities in SafePaaS, and then monitoring the controls where the risk could result into losses, operational losses, or financial misstatements. So those are some of the key benefits, and we're in the process of quantifying that. So hopefully we'll be publishing more details on our website about the actual benefits. But I can tell you this, that I was talking to a different customer that said they replaced SafePaaS with a big 4 manual process of doing all this on a project, and their bill went down from, just in the first 6 months, went down from, for the first year rather, went down from 1.5 million to half by using SafePaaS to automate that. So we're pretty excited about helping cloud customers. So Rick, I'd love to have you close on some of your experiences, and then Emma, if you can just close out the meeting.
Yeah, so, and I think, one of the important things to understand here is, as opposed to, the case study, I think I talked through it where we had the life sciences company, and they required quite a bit of validation beforehand, and if you're choosing Oracle, which I hope you do because it's the best software in the world, is Oracle is going to tell you their segregation of duties and their security is built in. You need to investigate that. And, Adil and his company wouldn't be there if it was all built in. And they want to make sure that you're aware that they want to make sure that you're comfortable with that, so you'll proceed.
Right.
I would suggest that, anybody that's considering considering Oracle or any software for that matter that is built in cloud, because they do have a lot of the security built in, is you really spend some time in understanding all the components of security and risk that are involved, so that there isn't a uncomfortable discussion with auditors. Because at some point in time, if those considerations are taken, it's almost guaranteed you'll have that conversation, and pulling that into place so that you're understanding what the implications of the implementation are, but making sure it's a success, and that's at the end of the day, that's what Adil and I are all about.
Well, thank you, Rick, for those comments, and I think hopefully this has been beneficial to our listeners, where you can plan out your projects better and make sure that risk and controls are considered, as Rick said, upfront, so you have fewer surprises and less risk in going live. Hopefully these tips were helpful. Emma, if you want to close out the meeting, really appreciate Rick, you joining, and everybody listening to us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, so I just want to thank everybody for joining us today. A huge thank you to Rick and Adil for those great talking points today. Adil and Rick are available to set up a one-on-one chat if you would like to have a chat around your own circumstances, so please do reach out to us. So with that, a big thank you to our speakers today and everybody for attending, and we hope you'll join us again next month. So thank you, everybody, and have a great evening.
Bye.
Bye now.
Bye.